Also, I apologize for the very nasally voice that you're hearing. I've had a really bad cold this week. It wasn't COVID, thank God, but it was a really nasty flu. So now I am very congested and I sound a bit weird, so apologies for that. Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Sheen and I am currently based in Dubai and I work as a consultant. Today I want to talk to you about consulting in general, what it is and why I chose to do it. So let's start with what is consulting. I think it is probably one of the hardest jobs to describe because it cannot be described in one sentence, but I'll give it my best shot. So when it comes to consulting, usually what happens is you have a client and that client will recruit your company and your company creates a team which has different levels. So you will have analysts, consultants, managers and the partners, and together you're going to go down to the client side and understand the problem that they have at hand and really try to do a lot of in-depth digging and interviews and research and market research. So you understand the problem and then you synthesize it and you try to come up with a solution and you build up the solution in detail and then you advise the client on how to move forward. And usually, not usually, in some cases, depending on the company you work for and the client that you're working for, you can also then implement those solutions for them. So this is a very generic description of what a consultant does. You basically go down, understand the problem, and then you do your own research and you bring in your own creativity and you bring in your own knowledge and you try to design a solution for the client and you leave them with the solution and then you go away. And the projects can be of varied length depending on who you're working for again and the nature of the problem you're trying to tackle. It can range from 3 weeks to 3 years. But most of them tend to be a few months long, and this is the average. Now, when we're talking about consulting, there are also different types of consulting. So you have management consulting, strategy consulting, marketing consulting. It's a lot of different things, but most of them fall under the same bracket of management/strategy consulting, which is exactly what I'm doing. So a lot of you and a lot of people ask me why consulting, especially given that I come from a scientific background. So I thought I would go through my list of reasons today as to why I chose to go into consulting. Okay, so number one is just the variety of projects that you get to do. So coming from academia especially, where you become, especially through my PhD, I became a very in-depth specialist of a very niche area of the spine. And there are only a few other people who understand what you're talking about, but that's it, right? So you're kind of boxed into the area that you work in and you become a specialist. But this is not something I wanted to do. I like variety, I get bored, so I need to move on to new things, and I wanted to learn a lot more about different industries that I have not been exposed to. And that's why consulting was perfect, right? So when you're working as a consultant, you get to do anything and everything. It could be healthcare related, it could be working with the government, it could be working with a hospital, it could be working with an oil and gas company, it could be working with road transport. It's literally anything and everything because we are not specialist consultants, so we work for any kind of company. And just the variety of industries that you get exposed to is incredible. And obviously for me, going into things that is not healthcare or is not science is completely new territory. So you get to learn so much and so quickly as well. So there's the whole 80-20 rules that consultants love talking about. So it is about identifying, the key things that will give you an overview of the majority of the picture. So that's why I think it's wonderful because you get to learn very quickly in depth about so many different things. Number two is you get to work in a team. So again, comparing to academia, you're on your own, you do have supervisors and PIs to look after you, and you are part of a bigger research group. But in consulting, for every client project, there is a team that forms. And then once you're on that team, you will work together with these people just for this project. And then after this project, you're dismantled, and then you will be picked up again by a different team for a different project. So not only you get to work with so many different people on a very close level, but you also get to work in a small team. Therefore, you have such a big impact with your work. Even now for me, when I've just started, but the amount of impact that my work has is incredible because the team is so small, and what the chunk of work that you are now being allocated is actually a big chunk, and that chunk is what goes to the client as well. So you immediately see the impact of the work that you've done and how the client is perceiving it. You get feedback, you see whether it's being implemented or not. So that's really, really cool, and I think that's probably less frequent in other kind of workplaces, especially when you've just started. So for example, it's my first project, but I already interact with high-level consultants and partners in my office, but I also get to work with the client already. So that's really, really cool. Thirdly, you get to work with very interesting people. I think when you think about the clients, right, it could be, as I said, you could be working with ministers, you could be working with bankers, you could be working with famous people, you can be working with very, very big organizations. And when you're working with them, you interact with everyone at different levels in the organization. You get to work with the people who are actually on the ground doing the field work, but you also get to interact with the really high level executives and the CEOs and the people who make decisions. Especially when you're in the public sector and you're working on policy work, etc., you actually get to influence how policymakers are making decisions and things like that, and that is really, really interesting, especially when you come in, first job, you're new, and you get to interact with people like that and be part of the conversation. I think that's really cool, and obviously you get to learn so much. The exposure is incredible. You interact with so many people, you see how they work, you see their approach to different problems and how holistic their views tend to be because of the experience that they have, and you learn so much. Like, you don't even realize how much you absorb from people when you're working with them, and it's incredible. So you learn so much from that. The next thing is, obviously this is pre-COVID, there's so much traveling that you do as a consultant because you do go to the client site a lot of times, and a lot of times the clients are not based near you. So I am based in the Middle East, I am in Dubai, and most of the clients are outside of Dubai in different places in the Middle East, in Africa, and also some of them are in Asia. So in usual times we would get to travel and go see the client, and obviously then you're getting to travel, you get to see a different country, you get to meet people of different cultures, and obviously during the weekend you get some time off where you can also explore. So that's really interesting, and I've been talking to other consultants who've been doing this from before COVID, and they were telling me how they've become experts at packing and how they always have a packed suitcase under the bed because you never know when you have to go. So it's like managing 2 suitcases at all times, so that you take one, you come back, take the other one. And I think that's really, really cool. That's a very interesting lifestyle, not something I would want to do on a long-term basis, but definitely something I would like to try. So hopefully, fingers crossed, COVID is going to go away soon, and I will get to experience this whole traveling lifestyle of a consultant. Also, when we're talking about consulting, you learn so many skills on the job, right? So you have so many transferable skills. You learn how to do project management, you learn how to communicate with clients, you learn how to synthesize strategies, you learn how to do problem solving, you learn how to work in a team, you learn communication, you learn presentation skills. It's just a lot of things. And because, as I said, you work in different sectors as well, so you're gaining some sort of, maybe limited, but specialist knowledge in very different fields. So that's when you look at this as a portfolio of what skills you have at the end, it's really, really good, which is why so many consultants leave consulting after a few years, because they have so many exit strategies ahead of them. There are so many options that open up. You can go join an industry-specific job, you can start your own thing, or you can, because while you're working through consulting, you realize what are the sectors that you might be interested in, or what particular skill you have that is really good. For example, let's say you've worked on a few marketing projects and now you realize that you really like marketing and you're very good at marketing, you can go into marketing. Or if throughout the projects you realize that I really love FS, which is financial services, then some people transition into going into banking. So it's just such a good little time where you learn so quickly about so many things that it gives you then an arsenal of things and tools and skills and knowledge that you can choose from to decide how to shape your future career. And even in terms of exit strategies, a lot of people decide to either stay in consulting and climb the ladder, which I will come on to in a minute, or they just decide to go out, either go into a boutique consulting, which does something very specific for a specific industry, go to industry, or go to an MBA to then go further into the business route. And it's just so varied. At the moment, you keep getting emails about people leaving because it's end of year, and just the variety of things they're going into is incredible. And I think that's what's cool, because once you've done consulting, you have it in the bag, and then you just have that skill base that you can now decide what to go on to afterwards, and you're not limited in any way at all, which is great. And then of course, the one reason I think that a lot of uni graduates apply to consulting is it's a very clear path. So you know exactly what the application process is like. It has like 10 million rounds, yes, I agree, but you know exactly what they are. You have the application, you have the phone interview, you have the tests, you have the case study based interviews, you have the group interviews. So it's very clear what you have to do, and because every year they do the same batch recruitment, you know how it works. So that's why it's easy to then prep for it. And they do all the companies do a lot of campaigns and workshops to help people in terms of application. So it is very clear what you need to do when you're applying, which is why a lot of people do it. It's a structured pathway of applying. But also once you're in, the progression is also very clear. You know the different levels. The levels obviously depend on the different companies. They call them different things, but there's always the entry-level position, and then after a couple of years you're promoted to being either a consultant or a senior consultant, depending where you start from. Again, depending on the degree that you have, whether you have a PhD, a bachelor degree, or an MBA, you will start at a different position on the timeline, but you know exactly how to get to the next stage, whether it is just a specific number of years that you need to do, or it's specific skills that you need to tick off. So then it's a very clear progression, and it's very transparent. So you know, if you want to stay into consulting and you want to make your way all the way up to becoming a partner, it's very clear what you need to do, and then you can just work on that. So again, people who really like a structured career progression, consulting is great, because you don't have to worry. It's not confusing about, okay, how do I make it to the next level and stuff like that. It's just very, very clear. So that's one thing I think that people who like structured progression would love. So all in all, these are the main reasons usually why people go into consulting, and these are the reasons why I choose to go into consulting. And I will not lie to you, it's not all rosy. It's not easy. First of all, application is really, really hard. I did so many interviews. I had so many rejections before I got accepted. So that's very normal. Everyone goes through that. That's one very key characteristic of applying to consulting. You need to have a lot of rejections in hand. And then once you're in as well, there are a few things. Obviously, the first one is the steep learning curve. You are thrown into the deep end, which some people like, some people struggle with. I personally had a bit of both. I like it because you don't waste a lot of time on just like, brain dead kind of training where you're not really putting anything into practice. You just learn by doing, which is great. But at the same time, it is very stressful, and you need to be able to keep up with the pace that everyone else is going at. And obviously you're new, so you're trying to learn things while also increasing your speed and becoming more efficient. So it's a lot of things to balance at the same time. And there's a steep learning curve, there's so much you need to assimilate and reproduce at the same time. It's challenging, but it is fun, and it is worth it. It depends, again, how you view things. I love being challenged intellectually, so that part of it, I really like the steep learning curve. And then there's also the work-life balance, but this is known worldwide that consulting is not necessarily the best work-life balance. It has not been too bad for me. It's definitely a lot worse than what my friends in other industries and other careers have, but I'm getting used to it. And because while you're at work, everyone else is the same as you, so you don't feel it as much. But basically my weekdays are just for work, and I guess once I learn the job a bit better, I will be quicker, and you understand the system a bit better, then it will not be as bad in terms of working hours. But this is something that all the companies are trying to improve in terms of the work-life balance. But what can you do? Because, you know, it's the requirement of the project, it's the requirement of the client. We all know what we signed up for. It is not a shock in any way. So yeah, and maybe I will make another video on the actual challenges of working as a consultant, because I think it's very important to give the full picture of what being a consultant is like, so that people who are trying to make the decision can make a fully informed decision, if that's what it's called. But yeah, yeah, so far so good. I am liking being a consultant. I do like my job, and I'm looking forward to experiencing a bit more of the real consulting life once COVID stops being annoying. But yeah, otherwise, I hope this video was useful. I know a lot of consulting questions have been coming into the comment section, so I will try and make a lot more about the consulting world. And, you know, if you have any specific questions, specific ideas for the videos, do let me know. But until then, I'm gonna go enjoy my weekend now, given that, you know, weekdays are just work. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye.